Mark here again, folks. You all know how I do cookbooks and bring information. So I've been looking at the our writing system, right? It's interesting because the word writing, like put it like this. I've just been studying letters. I've been fascinated for the last couple of days. I've just been transfixed and somewhat mesmerized, enthralled by our writing system. And I don't know why my spirit's just been leading me to really get into the writing system and its derivative, like where it's derived. And it led me to back to Egypt, Africa. Led me to the Egyptian hieroglyphics, which is a pictorial or pictograph form or stylistic style of writing. It's a pictographic stylistic style of writing. And out of that, it led me to, I found that out of there, we have the Semitic speaking people who were the Sumerians, who were the Proto-Canaanites, that they took their form of writing from the pictographic style of writing, which is the hieroglyphics. So they borrowed from the Egyptians, and in so doing formulated their own style of writing. And this again is the Semitic group of people, which are the Proto-Canaanites. And proto means first and foremost, first and it means the first to form something. So Proto-Canaanites. So these were the first people to form the style of writing that we use today. And so from them, right, once they borrowed it from the Egyptians, or once they adopted a subset of the hieroglyphics to form their style of writing, then the Phoenicians, right, borrowed from the Semitic group, which is the Hebrew and the Aramaic, right? They borrowed from them. And the Phoenicians now, in their borrowing and adaptation, began to refine the more primitive form that they borrowed from them and create their own style of writing. And what I found was interesting, all of these styles of writing, they wrote from right to left. And this style of writing from right to left is called bustropheidonic or bustropheidonical or bustropheidonical. So they had a bustropheidonical style of writing. That was their writing system. This is ancient methods of writing. It's called bustropheidon. And bustropheidon, it means to turn like the ox or like the ox turns. And what that means is, you think of a farmer, someone who's out, who's a husband, who does husbandry, all right? What they would do with the ox is they would plow the land, but they would turn, it would alternate, and it would form these grooves into the surface, into the ground. They're called indentations. And if you think about it, so it was like this. It was a swerving, right? So they would write from right to left, left to right, right to left, and then and in so doing you would have the pattern of a swerve. And this again, ancient methods of writing. This is the Semitic speaking people, Sumerians. This is the Phoenicians, the Pro-Canaanites. This is how, and all of this was borrowed from the Egyptian hieroglyphics, pictographic style of writing, and they created this writing system. So now we're up to the Phoenicians, right? The Phoenicians is accredited with the expansion now, because this is primitive times, and it was very localized. But the Phoenicians, being traders as they were maritime businessmen, because they traded with everyone across the Mediterranean, etc. So the Phoenicians now began to expand this style of writing, and in so doing, refining it. And you have what's called transliteration. So symbols were now being transliterated, and the word aleph, which is the first letter in Hebrew, or once the Phoenicians, we're now at the Phoenicians, right? Bear with me, it's stuff I got to remember this stuff. So the Phoenicians now, we're at the Phoenicians. The Greeks began to borrow from the Phoenicians because, again, the Phoenicians did business with everyone and they traded with everyone. So to communicate, the Greeks now start to borrow from the Phoenicians, and in so doing, the Greeks now started to refine and transliterate. Every group transliterated, which means to change language or to change letters from its previous language to The current language, right. So there was transliteration. They were changing the letters from one language to the next language. So the Greeks now started to refine, and the Greeks, in so doing, transliterated the Phoenician style of writing to their style of writing. And from the Greeks now, the Romans, the Romans start to borrow by means of the Italians, started to borrow from the Greeks, and the Romans transliterated from alpha, because alpha is the first letter, to A, the actual letter A. This is transliteration, folks. Now, this is how the word alphabet came about. Alphabet came about because of the word alpha, which is the first letter in Greek. It's now, and beta being the second letter. So alpha and beta was now refined by the Romans to what's called alphabet. The word itself is called alphabet. And the actual symbols were transliterated to the letter A and the letter B. And this is how we came about with the word alphabet. So that's just a little, like, a brief history of how the word alphabet came about. But what I found interesting, though, and I want to go back to this, is that they used to write, when they started this whole system, the Phoenicians, the Pro-Canaanites, the Proto-Canaanites, the Proto-Canaanites, the Phoenicians, the Semitic group, Semitic-speaking people, the Sumerians, they all wrote from right to left. From right to left. And as I said, it's called, they adopted a style called Bostrofedon, right? Bostrofedon. And they wrote from right to left, right to left, right to left, left to right, right to left. They would alternate. It would be alternated. But it would always start from right to left. And so the question I asked myself is why? And I've researched, I got all these books and I've been researching, and I never really came across a solid answer. I mean, there've been guesses, so on and so forth, but there's never been like a conclusive answer. A solid, conclusive answer. So I formulated my own hypothesis, right? This is my surmise. This is my intellectual speculation here. I'm speculating, purely speculative, but it's an educated speculation. It's not just whimsical. I think they wrote from right to left. Now here's the thing. Once we got to the Greeks. Phoenicians were still practicing right to left, right to left, right to left. So you have a paper, you write from right to left. Once we got up to the Greeks were still doing right to left, right to left. As of today, modern times, you still have some cultures that do right to left. I believe that the Aramaic is still right to left. Hebrew is still right to left. Persia is still right to left. So there's still some groups that still do. But in terms of modern European style of writing, it's left to right, stop, left to right, stop, left to right, stop. Again, in those ancient times, it was right to left, left to right, right to left, left to right, right to left. Like I said, and it means to turn on the ox, Bostrofedon. But here's what I want to say, my speculation. I don't want to miss my point. I speculate that the reason they wrote from right to left in primitive ancient times is this. This is purely speculative. If you study the human brain, the right hemisphere is predominantly responsible for your creativity. So people like Mozart, people like Van Gogh, the great artists of history, right? Those who are extremely artistic, scientifically proven, there's research that these people operated predominantly from a right brain thinking orientation, if that makes any sense whatsoever. So I believe that because we were talking about the word proto means, again, its earliest form, the very beginning, the inception of something. Because this was the inception of learning how to communicate by a writing system, which means to communicate your verbal ideas, thoughts, etc., through symbols, which are letters in this case. So I believe because they were at the primitive, the very inception, that the right side of the brain were predominantly being used in these times, because the right side of your brain is responsible for creativity, for imagination and imaginative. All of your imaginative prowess and powers rest in the right hemisphere. All of the creativity as an artist, if whether you draw, play an instrument, those powers rest predominantly in the right hemisphere of your brain. So because at this point, it was extreme creativity. Think about it. Just use common sense. They're taken from the hieroglyphics. It all came out of the pictographic style of writing, which is from the Egyptians. So they were being extremely creative in terms of creating a writing system that's never been done before. This has never been done before. So this was a pioneering of epic proportions, right? This was a pioneering of epic proportions. Therefore, creativity was the trend of that day. The left side of the brain is responsible for analytical, critical, scientific, mathematical, all of the assessments and sophistication of thoughts, everything that has to do with analyzing, assessing is the left side of the brain. It's the rational, analytical side of the brain. At that time, imagination was more the talk of the day. Your imagination was what was in demand because, again, it involved creativity, things that has to do with intuition, things that has to do with just a feeling, a natural vibe resides on the right side of the brain. Things that are critical, that involves meticulous details, paying attention, is on the left side of the brain. Now, we're not saying that both are needed. Obviously, we use the whole brain at all times, no matter what we're doing. But I'm trying to identify something here that's extremely specific. That because it was the inception, because it was the very first thing that's never been done before, creativity, your ability to imagine, to create, was what was needed at that time. And I believe that's why they wrote from right to left, because the right hemisphere of the brain was what, and is, well, not is, because that would be present, but is what was like, that's what was dominant at that time. That side of the brain was dominant at that time. Over the years, as things became more refined and cultivated and prepared and developed, I believe this is when the left side of the brain now began to take over. And this is why when we got up to the Greeks, the writing from right to left kind of took a break with the Greeks. The Greeks officially adopted left to right style of writing, which is what we use till today. Because the Romans adapted from the Greeks. And so we have a European writing system today that goes from left to right. And by this time now, the analytical brain is what we use more in terms of our writing system. Again, purely speculative. This is my educated guess of the science based on my research. So don't get on here and start saying, oh no, that's not true, that's wrong, da 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 da. It's a formula. It's called a hypothesis for a reason. If you research the word hypothesis, it's a theory, a working theory. Okay, it's just a working theory, and that's what I believe. Why they wrote from right to left, and now we write from left to right. So there's a lot more. We can go on all day. I got a whole bunch of information I found, but in the interest of time, we're gonna leave it right there until next time, y'all. Y'all know how I'm doing: cooking books, bringing information, having great intellectual orgasms, giving you intellectual orgasms. Peace.